to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time today. We have a very special show coming right up. Our guest today is HeatherAsh Amara, and she's here today to talk to us about her new book, Awaken Your Inner Fire. So HeatherAsh is an inspirational speaker and teacher and the author of the best-selling book, Warrior Goddess Training. HeatherAsh graduated from UC Davis in California, and upon graduation, she entered the business media world and began noticing the conscious and unconscious bias against women. At the same time, HeatherAsh was feeling this inner calling for understanding, which drew her to a long apprenticeship and teaching partnership with world-renowned teacher Don Miguel Ruiz, author of the international bestseller, The Four Agreements. So let's welcome to the show, HeatherAsh.
Thanks so much, Marianne. It's great to be here again.
Oh, it's such a joy to have you here. And what an inspiration you are to me, man. I've been following your community for some time, and I just love the information that you're putting out. And so I was so excited when you had this new book.
Yes, me too. This book has been in the works for a long time, so I was very happy when it was released to the world.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I know every time an author creates a book, it's like having a family, another addition to your family, because it's really kind of a journey of love in having everything come together, which kind of brings me to like my question here. You've written so many wonderful books in the past. What was the main inspiration behind this book?
This book was a really personal one for me. I had started a center in Berkeley, and I had finished my first book. I had trained a bunch of teachers that were teaching all over the country. So a lot of the dreams that I had in my life were coming true. And yet what I discovered is that I was still really stressed out, that my team was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling really overwhelmed in my life. And it suddenly struck me that I had some deep fundamental beliefs around work and spaciousness and stress and busyness that really weren't serving me or my community. Mm-hmm. And so I actually took a couple of years off, and spent that time dedicated to exploring how do we do work in a more gracious, open, spacious way. That's where the book came from.
Well, and I know your work in the past has really been focused for the feminine. Is this a book that's basically for men and women?
Yes, this one is for everyone. And I actually wrote this book before Warrior Goddess Training came out. Mm-hmm. So it was written in, I think, 2007. And then I got to have the opportunity to update it and freshen it up for the modern reader. And I put a lot of emphasis on this one of how to create more spaciousness in your life, but also how to really pay attention to what we do with our energy. So I see that each of us has a fire inside of us, and that every action we do either brightens that fire or dampens that fire. And when we start to really pay attention to our energy and how our actions and thoughts and beliefs affect our energy, then we come back into more deeper relationship with ourselves in a way that brings a lot more happiness and focus at the same time.
So, and that's what you mean by awaken your inner fire, is really having that spark and that fire within you. So it's driving your happiness and your passion and your purpose.
Yes, exactly. And that there's a sense of alignment with your mind, your emotions, your physical body, and your energetic body. Because I find that a lot of us are out of balance. Our mind tends to bully our emotional body and our physical body, and we tend to push ourselves and force ourselves to do things rather than inviting ourselves, which helps us to be a lot brighter when we're in a sense of play and joy in our lives rather than force and push.
Yeah, I think many people can relate to that, especially when we look at a world that's so busy. We're a society that's addicted to busyness.
We really are. And I remember when email first started, people saying, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing because we're going to have so much more leisure time because of email.
I remember that.
Yes. Yeah. And so now we're in this incredible digital world where we're expected to answer things instantaneously. And there's so much data coming at us. Our world is speeding up, and awakening your inner fire for me is about learning to really tend to your own energy and your own presence so that you slow down even as the world is speeding up. And in slowing down, you actually get more done.
Well, and that's so amazing because I do remember the time where they said, oh, you're going to have so much more time. This is all going to be innovated for you, and it's just going to be perfect. And what's happened is kind of the flip, where we have people that are addicted to their cell phones. The millennials, I've heard reports in case studies and where the millennials are the greatest generation that is suffering and battling depression and other loneliness type issues. And so when we look at this, in your book brings into perspective how you can start actually being present in life and living.
Yes, exactly. And to start putting the phone down and to starting to look inside more and to listen to that connection. So I feel like when we're really in touch with our inner fire, with our life force energy, and instead of just taking action without thought, that we're getting quiet and listening to what's the next best action for me to take, that we become much more wise. And instead of just taking action, feeling like we're getting things done, but we're actually just spinning our wheels, we start to craft our world in such a way that we aren't distracting ourselves as much, that we're willing to sit in just spaciousness and calm and listen and pause between activities to then say to ourselves, okay, where's the best place for me to put energy here? Mm-hmm. And that changes everything.
Well, and so when you're pulling everything together for this book, was it also because you could see that maybe you were having, people, part of your tribe and people who are following you and your clients who were kind of reaching out with the same type of issues in regards to busyness and stress and those kind of things?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like it's such an issue. I was seeing it in my own life, but I was also seeing it everywhere in people's lives, that there was, what I feel like, and it's just continued, is that people are busier than ever, but they're unhappier than ever. As you've said, not just the millennials, it's also, I think, people from every generation. And there's this, everybody feels overwhelmed. There's hardly anybody I know that doesn't have a sense of overwhelm in some level of their life. And it's not about not having things to do, because there's plenty of things to do, but it's really how we're doing, how we're taking the action. And for me, it boils down to coming back to what I call our true work. And our true work is one word that's a focus of where we want to put our energy. And your true work isn't something you've mastered. It's something that you're willing to practice and explore and that you feel really passionate about. So, for example, your true work might be love. It might be presence. It might be compassion. It might be being centered. And how you know it's your true work is it's something that you can do and practice everywhere in your life. So at your 9-to-5 job, we'll say, with your family, and that you can also practice it when you're picking up dog poo, that you can be practicing it everywhere. So if things are going great in your life, you can practice your true work. If things are really challenging and feel like they're falling apart, then you can really practice your true work. And it helps us to erase the lines in our life. And that's where I see we've created a lot of suffering for ourselves, is that we've created all these lines of this is my work and this is my spirituality and this is my family time. And what having our true work does is it starts to erase those lines so that we're practicing something from our center, from our core, across the board. And it creates this beauty in our lives is what I've seen.
Mm. What a beautiful place to be in, because so many people are they're really craving to have that in their lives.
Yes. Yeah, we're really craving meaning and purpose. And yet sometimes people get overwhelmed with this idea of, I have to know what my purpose is. And they have the false belief that their job that they're earning money at has to be their purpose, which it may be. It's lovely when it is, but it's not necessary.
Yeah,
but if you are focusing on your true work, then it really doesn't matter what you're doing in your day job, because it's all a place to practice.
So when you talk about true work, why don't you break it down for our audience what that really means? Because I think a lot of people can get confused. Is this the work that I'm doing at my job? What if I don't like my job? Is it, something else I'm supposed to be doing? What is that exactly?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's a quality of something that you want to feel in your life. So it's not anything that you're doing. It's about how you're being through the actions you're taking. What's the energy you're bringing to every action in your life? And it's actually pretty simple to figure out what your true work is. And what I tell people is, you don't have to get it perfectly right. You might pick a word that right now feels like your true work, and in a week or two realize, oh, actually that's not it. There's a better word for me. Mm-hmm. You can change it at any time, and also might change on its own. So, for example, my true work for years, I felt like my true work was love, learning how to love everything in my life, especially the things I didn't love. And that would be the question. So something challenging would happen, and I would go back to, okay, my true work in this situation is, how do I bring love to this? How do I find the quality of love in my body while I'm dealing with this challenging thing? And again, it was a practice. And then recently, my word changed, and I feel like now my true work is presence. How do I become present with everything that I'm doing? So an easy way to find your true work is to just sit quietly. And I like to imagine that you have a little pebble or a little rock that you drop into the top of your head. And imagine that within you there's this pool, and that you're imagining dropping this rock into your body, and that it drops into that pool in the center of your being, and it ripples out the answer to the question, what is my true work? If you just get quiet and ask your being, what is my true work? And then wait, not for your head to answer it, or from your heart to answer. You'll have a word that will arise from your depths. And don't worry if it's the right word. Just take whatever word arises and practice it, and say to yourself, okay, I'm going to practice this word as my true work over the next week or two, and see how it feels.
That really gets a person so in touch with their intuition, and also starting to develop that part that I would like for you to expand on a little bit too, is that faith part as well.
Yes. It is so much of what we're working to do is shift from the trying to figure things out logically. And I'll just say, logic's great. I love logic. It's really important. And yet it can also cause us to struggle, because the world isn't linear, and we're trying to make everything in our life often fit into linear, what I think of as linear thinking, which is if I do this and this and this, this will be the result. If I just do all the steps correctly. But life doesn't play that way. Life is circular. Life has beginnings and endings, and the endings don't necessarily show up where we'd like them to. And the beginnings sometimes come more quickly than we would like them to. So when we come back into circular living and realizing that we want to stay engaged with all the beginnings and all the endings in our life, then we can start to settle into ourselves in a deeper way and come back into faith. Faith knows that things take time. If you think about a garden, you plant the seed for something and it doesn't grow immediately. It takes time. And so that's what we're working to do is come back into the faith of the process of life, and that sometimes things take a while to gestate, and sometimes things end before we would like them to, but that's part of the cycle as well.
Well, and what I find fascinating is a lot of times when cycles end, and maybe it's not quite what it was that we were expecting or wishing for, what happens next is better than what we could imagine.
Yes. And when we look back at our lives, we often see that. Like, it doesn't feel like that while it's happening, while the ending is happening. It's often painful and scary and confusing. But for most of us, if we look back at our endings, the places where things closed in our lives, we can see that there was a gift on the other side. And it's a really, really good reminder.
It kind of allows people to kind of be in the process without having to worry about what, be in control and worry about making things work. Because when we allow ourselves the freedom to just say, okay, it's going to show up as it's meant to, and I don't have to be in control of all the endings or all the beginnings, then it puts us in a place of, I think, greater freedom.
Yes, exactly. And when we're trying to control things, and that just happens when we feel unsafe on the inside for whatever reason, often we can go into trying to control the outside world, which is super frustrating because, we may have noticed that people aren't very controllable, no matter how much we would like to control them, and that life is not very controllable. Life does what it does. And so to step back and really feel into what can I control? And what we control is our perception, how we're choosing to perceive different situations. We can also control our attitude towards things. And we can control our reactions. And that's about it. Everything else we learn, we can try and navigate and invite change to happen. But really the place that we want to keep our focus on change happening is within ourselves, rather than on getting the world to fit us so that we feel safe.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on such a great word, invite, as opposed to these are things I have to do, or I've got to do this and I should be doing this. But when we invite ourselves to do something, man, that really shifts the energy.
It really does. And that's one of the things that is a powerful transformation, is to start looking at in your life around where is it that you're pushing or up against resistance or fear in your life, and just start to name where are you trying to force yourself to do things. Where's there resistance? Where's there procrastination? And I always like to start by just becoming aware, not trying to fix or change anything in the beginning, but to really start by, let me become aware of what my patterns are. Where am I losing energy? Where am I dampening my fire? Where am I feeling frazzled or burnt out? And to get curious about it, pay attention, name those areas. And then once you get the data, once you've gathered the data to start to see, when I wake up in the morning and I have negative thoughts, I lose a lot of energy. I feel my fire gets dampened. But when I wake up in the morning and I've had a really good dream and great sleep, I feel ready for my day and more centered and happy. That's great information to have. And then you can start changing things at that point.
Well, and you've brought this up a couple of times. You've kind of touched on it, and I would love for you to expand on this further. But also in your book, you talk about embracing our emotions and how this all plays a part in the bigger picture of awakening our inner fire.
Yeah, the emotional body is one of the places where we tend to lose a tremendous amount of energy without realizing it. And we haven't really been trained how to be in relationship to our emotional body. Mm-hmm. So to bring it back into relationship, I really believe that our emotional body wants to heal, and that what a lot of us have done is when we've had emotions in the past, in our childhood or as adults, that we haven't known what to do with, we have a tendency to stuff them and try not to feel them. And it's almost like we're carrying a backpack around that has all these old emotions crammed into them. And the backpack is really heavy. And what happens when we don't express emotion is that it gets under pressure and then it blows out sideways. And so we end up having a big upset around a very small thing, or we go into big grief without realizing why we're having such a reaction. Or we find we get numb. That's the other thing, is that when we've repressed our emotions over time, it can cause us to get numb, so we stop feeling anything. So to come back into right relationship with the emotional body means a willingness to unpack the backpack, basically, to clear out those old emotions in a safe way. And really, the main thing is just giving yourself permission to release the emotions from the past. One of my favorite ways is through movement, through putting on really good music and then letting your body move and letting your body know, okay, anything that's old or that I don't need to be carrying around any longer, let me release it through this movement or through sound. And what happens over time is that we get current with our emotional body, which is a glorious place to be, because then our reactions to the world are much less. They're current time rather than connected to a lot of pain from the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times I think people get confused. It's like, well, I've got all these old emotions. How do I get rid of them? How do I even identify them? And that's such a great way of doing it, is the dancing part.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And to be creative. So, for example, I was on the road and was living in an RV for a year, and during my travels, I hit this place of all this anger, and I realized it was anger from the past, and that I didn't need to figure out where it came from. I just needed to clear it. And so what I would do is regularly, when I felt that anger arise, I would pull over and go run into the desert and start throwing rocks and screaming. And it was, it took maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and I would just throw rocks and scream for a while, and then I would suddenly feel better. Then the energy would clear, and I'd be like, okay. And then I would go on. And doing that for, about a month of just whenever I felt that anger, instead of trying to intellectualize it or explain it or figure out who to blame or repress it, I just gave myself permission to express it in a safe way. It cleared. And that really changed my life.
What a powerful way to handle that. I just had a friend call me yesterday saying, gosh, I'm really sad and I don't know why. And, we were kind of talking about your book and different parts of it, how it would, kind of help her get to a place of releasing these emotions. And it was really interesting because she's like, oh, I hadn't thought about doing that, and went through and started doing the practice, and it worked.
I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah, we're just not taught these skills around the emotional body, and they're really simple. And it's just that place of letting our emotional body express the past, and we're not cycling it. So there's a difference between thinking a thought that then causes an emotion versus just going, oh, there's sadness here. Let me express the sadness. Let me let myself grieve. And sometimes while you're grieving, you then start to understand, oh, this is about like how many times I moved as a kid, or this is about the loss of my dog, or this is about, and sometimes you don't know. But the emotional body wants to heal when we start coming into relationship with it and really starting to trust it and let it move the energy. It'll let us know what's needed so that we can come into a sense of peace in our present day.
Well, I think that's such an important piece, is that people don't really, if you sit with it and you can't still figure out where this is coming from, whether it's anger or upset or whatever the emotion is, it's not that you have to really find that answer in order to release it.
Yes, exactly. It's an energy. So is it helpful to know where? Sometimes, but a lot of times it's not even necessary. The emotional body just wants to clear the emotion. And so how can you best support it? For people that know, and a lot of us know, I'll say this, a lot of us know what we have in our backpack from the past. So we know if we have repressed anger, or often we know if we have repressed grief. We have the sense because it leaks out. Mm-hmm. So to turn towards it rather than turning away from it and ask it, what do you need, sweetheart? To actually talk to the emotional body. What would serve you? How can I help this energy to move? And to then take the action. Because it's one thing to just think about it, and it's another thing to take the action. And I think sometimes the fear around the emotional body is people are afraid, well, if I go into the emotion, I'll never come out of it. I'll always be angry, or I'll always be in grief. But your physical body can't sustain an emotion forever. If you're really in, you'll get tired, you'll release emotion, you'll get tired, you'll feel better. And this is the key to knowing if you're releasing an emotion or if you're cycling it. So when you express an emotion and then you feel better afterwards, that means you've cleared it out. But if you notice that you're having an emotion and you don't feel better, what that means most of the time is it's because your mind has a story and it's telling you the story and poking the emotional body. So if I have a story that says, it's not fair that this situation happened to me, and I keep telling myself that story over and over again, I can keep having grief over and over again because I'm literally the mind's poking the emotional body to cause the grief. Once we get the mind out of the way and just have the emotion, it clears, and there's more space then. But it takes a lot of courage. So it's not necessarily an easy process, but it's so liberating.
It really is. And I can see a little bit of the influence of the Four Agreements here where, it's so you put it in such a beautiful way that it's expressed completely differently, but in a way that, readers can really pick up the book and start implementing it in their lives. And it's interesting. I've been told that if the ocean is salvation, there are many rivers that lead to it. And I believe it's the same thing when it comes to how we deal with, different things that have upset us.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And there's just so much grace I've seen that happen when we go directly into relationship with the emotional body and see it as an ally rather than something that we have to control or avoid.
Yeah. Well, in your book, you also talk about, making the bodily connection. And so what does that mean? Because, for people that now they've like, okay, well, I'm dealing with my emotions. I notice them, I release them. But now I need to make a bodily connection. So what do I do?
Coming back into relationship with the body around work is so important because especially those of us that are working with computers, we have a tendency to ignore our body. Can you think about how many times have you been working and didn't stretch regularly or didn't go to the bathroom or forgot to drink water and hydrate yourself? So sometimes our mind, again, overrides the body in a couple of different ways. One, that it pushes it and doesn't listen to what the body needs. And the other is that the mind then tends to tell the body what it should look like or what it should feel like. So we're not really in relationship with our actual body. We're in relationship with our image of what we think our body should be. And that's not healthy and doesn't serve us at all. So making the bodily connection is around starting to actually listen to what does your body need? How much sleep? Really basic. How much sleep does your body need? How much exercise? What kind of food? What serves it over time? And I think about it is that in relationship with our body, we really want to learn what nourishes our body in the long run versus what nourishes our body in the short run. So an example, short-term nourishment is sugar and coffee. Mm-hmm. They make us feel great in the short term, but often not so great in the long term. And there's a lot of things in our life that's like this, where it feels good in the short run, but it actually doesn't serve us in the long term. And that's what we want to explore with our body. When we're moving towards long-term nourishment, it can feel uncomfortable in the short run. So, for example, one of the examples that I use is that one way that people dampen their inner fire is by not speaking their truth, is by agreeing with what everybody else wants. And, especially if you're a pleaser and you want everybody else to like you, which is a common thing for humans, we think, well, I'll just do what other people want me to do, and then I'll be liked and have friends. So in the short term, it feels good because you feel like people like me. Mm-hmm. In the long run, it's incredibly damaging because you don't know what you want or what you like or who you are. But to change that pattern is going to be uncomfortable. For example, if somebody says to you, hey, where do you want to go to lunch today? And your pattern for years has been, I don't know, where do you want to go to lunch? Then the first time you change that pattern, that you listen to your body, you really ask your body, hey, buddy, what do you actually want for lunch? And you go to speak it, it's probably not going to come out, well, I'd really like to go to Italian food today. It's probably going to come out either, I want to go to Italian food, because it's been under pressure, mm-hmm. Or it's going to come out, well, I think Italian food would be okay. What do you think? Do you like Italian food? Would that be okay for you? We don't really have to go to Italian food. So it's either going to come out really rough or probably really apologetic. And we just have to bear with ourselves and support ourselves and love ourselves through that awkwardness of changing the pattern. And know it'll benefit us in the long run. It'll just feel vulnerable, icky, scary, perhaps, in the short run. But it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're practicing standing up for what your body needs or what your body wants.
Well, and you're so right. It's such a practice because it's when we get into these different spaces, where I always find the challenge over the years has been to be able to be assertive without aggression. Because when you come from a corporate world, everything's aggression, and it's you're in that kind of male spot, that male space all the time. So it's nice to be able to kind of reaffirm that, gosh, I can do this and be more in control with what it is I'm doing with just being assertive,
Yes, exactly. And that we can be really strong and really firm and really open-hearted. I think this is the difference is that most of us have learned to make a boundary or to be forceful in the world means that we have to close our heart and push our opinion or our idea or our belief. And that actually ends up dampening your fire because you're trying to force something to happen versus learning. And it's a skill. We have to learn it because there's very few role models for this. I'll put it that way. And we didn't learn it probably from our parents or our schooling. So to learn how to have an open heart, be super grounded and present, and clearly state what we want and stay with it. No, and also be flexible, obviously. But it's that open-hearted piece that we're opening rather than closing that has a totally different quality of feeling in our body. And I think a lot of chronic pain that we have as humans is because we're closing and pushing rather than opening and allowing and staying clear with ourselves.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And others. Yeah.
Well, and in your book, you talk about something that I think is absolutely brilliant, and it's about abandoning ourselves. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that with our listeners because, it's such an important piece.
Yes, it's such a huge piece. So this place of abandoning ourselves is anytime we're comparing ourselves to other people who we think we're supposed to be, the places that we're judging ourselves, the places that we've created an image of perfection and are holding ourselves up against that image of perfection rather than being with where we're at. Those are all places we abandon ourselves. And it's a habit that I think almost all of us have to some degree or another. Learning to come back home to ourselves is about being in relationship with who we are now, not who we were in the past, not who we think we're supposed to be now, not who we wish we are, but who are we actually? And getting to know ourselves intimately. What is my mind up to? What is my emotional body up to? What is my physical body up to? What's my energy up to? How am I in relationship with these different aspects of myself? And that we don't judge or abandon ourselves, but that we become our best ally. I love to think of it that we're holding hands with ourselves and we're inviting ourselves forward with love and with playfulness. And it makes life much more fun and engaging. That's for sure. That's what I've really learned. I have fun doing really difficult, like paying my taxes. I just make a game out of things now, rather than like, you've been bad, you have to pay these, or, you know, you're behind on this project. It's like, okay, sweetie, so what do you need to make this somewhat enjoyable, even if it's a challenging thing? And it's a mindset.
Yeah. And what a great example for a shift, because I'm sure, as you said, paying taxes, most people were cringing, you know, going, ooh. And
nobody usually loves it.
No. And you've taken it and made it like a kind of to a neutral kind of like, okay, well, what do we need? Let's get this going. Let's go, you know?
Yeah. Yes. And how can I support myself in the way that will work for me rather than what I think I should be doing? So often when I pay taxes now, I will take a bunch of my receipts in a box and I'll go to a coffee shop and I'll put on good music on my headphones and just hang out and drink some fun drink and just power through it. And I make it enjoyable in that way. Yeah. Same thing with cleaning the house. Crank the music, dance around, clean, and to do things a little bit at a time, a little step at a time is really powerful. And to also look for what are the systems that will help create ease in our life. That's another thing about not abandoning ourselves, is that when we are procrastinating or we're missing deadlines or we're losing things, we can go into judgment and say, I should be different, this is bad, or we blame other people. But if instead we get really curious and say, okay, well, there's a system that's missing. There's something that would help create more ease. So just a little example, I used to lose my car keys all the time. Like chronically, I would lose my car keys or my glasses or stuff. And I used to just judge myself around it and be frustrated. I lost a lot of energy looking for keys and judging myself. And one day I just got quiet and I was like, okay, there's something missing. What is it? What's the system that's missing? What would help me in this situation around losing my keys? And so I made an agreement with myself that, like, I have a clip on my keys. I'm looking at them right now. They're clipped to my purse. And when I come home, they get hung up in a particular place in my house. And they're always clipped someplace. And I still every once in a while lose my keys, but mostly I now have a system that works for me. And so if we can start looking at our lives, like, where's the system that's missing whenever there's frustration? It's really easy. Just look at where's the frustration in your life. And then ask yourself what system would help. And it becomes a fun, creative game. Again, how do I create a fix for this?
Yeah, how to move beyond this, and you're right, it does become a fun game because you can look for solutions as opposed to getting stuck in the problem.
Yes, exactly. And we become more solution oriented in our perception, which makes everything fabulous.
Well, and that seems to be a good part of this work, too, because as we're talking to ourselves, you know, it doesn't allow, and we're moving our emotional bodies, and we're, just releasing emotions that don't work for us anymore and going through all these different things, it really gets us out of any feeling of victim, like we're a victim, and puts us in a place of personal empowerment.
Yes, exactly. And judge and victim go hand in hand. So when we're judging ourselves, we're going to be victimized. You have to have a victim to have a judge. And we're also, it's very easy to feel victimized by other people or by the world. That place of the world is against me, or it's always a struggle. And one of my favorite games to play, and I'm having to play it with myself right now, is called What If Up. My friend Mindy Odlin created this game. And what many of us do is when things are challenging, or even when things are going really well, it's easy to fall in, what if this bad thing happens? And we go into start worst case scenario thing. So we start looking at what could go wrong. It's a bad habit. So what if up is what could go right? What's the best case scenario? And to start just brainstorming, what if this is the best thing that's ever happened and it's going to lead me to exactly what I need next in my life? And what if, so you just start looking at positive ideas of what could happen. And it shifts your whole attitude and your whole energy. Instead of grinding down into feeling victimized and negative, you open up to possibility. And I believe the universe then responds to that by showing possibility.
Well, you can feel it. As you were just even saying that, you can feel the difference in the energy as that's all moving. It's are we stuck in this space where we're just kind of, being the victim, or moving beyond that to a greater freedom?
Yes, exactly. And there's some cases where there's big changes in our life that we want to be gentle with ourselves, that are going to take time to find our feet again. And so I just want to remind everybody not to judge yourself if you're struggling with something, or not to judge yourself if you're not feeling loving. Because sometimes we can create a lot of suffering for ourselves by, like, I should be more loving right now. What's wrong with me? Or I should be over this already. And things take time. So that gentleness, that's another form of abandoning ourselves. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're working through, keep coming back to, instead of this shouldn't be happening or I shouldn't be having this experience, keep coming back to, what do I need? How do I hold my own hand through this experience or through this challenge? And it'll take as long as it takes. Sometimes some things take longer than others. It's a good thing to continue to remind ourselves.
Well, and it's so well put, this abandoning ourselves, because when we think about that, going, am I abandoning myself right now with this thought process? It really allows you to get into the moment and be present in regards to how it is that we're acting or thinking or doing.
Yes, it really does. And it can be kind of horrifying to realize how often we abandon ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so, again, be gentle as you're going through this process. And, I've been on this path for a long time, and I really feel like I read this book for myself. Like, I'm excited to go back and read it again because I'm still working on some of these things. I've come a long way. But these patterns we're talking about are very deep in our psyche, and they take time to unravel. And it's not that you're going to read my book, or I think any book, and just go, oh, good, now I'm never going to abandon myself again, and I'm always going to invite myself forward to what I want to create. It's an ongoing course correction that can be done with love. And I find, today that I'll get stuck with something, but I recover much more quickly. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to move towards, is that we're catching ourselves and coming back towards love, coming back towards not blaming or shaming ourselves or others, but looking at what's the structure that's missing? What do I need? How can I best support myself? That we're in dialogue and relationship with ourselves and really tending to that beautiful inner fire that we each have.
Well, and when we ask these questions, when we're brave enough to ask these questions, it lets us come, we're able to face it and come, basically go through it and walk onto the other side.
Yes. Yeah, we stay with ourselves and we find our own path, and we can use other people to inspire us for sure. Mm-hmm. We can also get support. So walking this path isn't about you have to do it by yourself completely and there's no one that can help you. It's a recognition that you're responsible for your life. We're all responsible for our life. And part of that responsibility means knowing when to ask for support, knowing when to ask for guidance, knowing when to ask for help, and being really honest about that. I'm definitely a big fan that we're all interdependent and that we need each other. And asking for support and guidance is a gift that we give to ourselves. At the same time, learning to trust ourselves at deeper and deeper level.
Well, and I know that people use this practice as well, the practice of awakening your inner fire, to move beyond, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but not just busyness, but stress in their lives.
Yes, absolutely. And again, to watch the places where we're in busyness or overwhelm or stress and to notice, what is stress doing to me? And here's something that's interesting. I read these studies that stress isn't so bad for us. It's our worry about stress that's actually really bad.
Oh, there you go.
So it's our stress about stress. So I like to think about it that, I love working hard. I love being engaged in a project and, there's a deadline and, you're really going for it. And that once it's done, then you let go. Then you go back to ease again. So it's not that stress is bad in our life. It's just that for many of us, we're just in stress constantly because we're worrying about things. The stress is created by thought. When we're under pressure and we're supporting ourselves, it can bring out the best of us. It can bring out our gifts. If you think about athletes that are under pressure, it's when they shine the most. And sometimes in situations in our life when there is pressure, it brings out our gifts. But what makes it sustainable is that we're supporting ourselves rather than tearing ourselves down. So to really minimize the stress that's coming from, I can never do this right, or I'm doing it wrong, or I should have done this already, and the place of worry, future worry, or looking at the past of what went wrong, and to really coming into the present. Again, what do I need to support myself in a good way through whatever's happening, high stress, low stress. But that when we rest, then we really rest, that we're not churning in our mind, that we're in stillness.
Yeah, we're able to be in that really peaceful place.
Yeah, one of my favorite ways to do that is to look for what I call the gaps. I might have talked on the show about this before. It's such a beautiful, simple way is that in our lives we always have gaps. So there's waiting in the line for a cup of coffee, waiting in the grocery store, walking down the hallway to the bathroom, waiting in your car at a stoplight. Those are all gaps, and they might be 5 seconds, they might be 10 minutes. In the gap, to start going towards stillness, to start going towards calm, to start practicing your true work. So, for example, I had an acupuncture session today, and I had a 5-minute that showed up. And, the temptation is pick up your phone and check Facebook or answer email. And I just put my phone down and I just started breathing. I'm like, this is a gap. Just be present. Just show up. Just slow down. And when we start to use those gaps as an opportunity to create more stillness or more peace or more calm in our body, then it's going to totally rewire us in a beautiful way. And so don't start to switch the pattern of filling the gaps with worry or filling the gaps with busyness. And what else can you fill the gap with?
meditation would be great,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, singing a fun song every time you're at a stoplight. So we can really change our relationship with ourselves by consciously inserting what we want in those gaps and making those sacred for ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it really allows us to, be in that present moment where we can really enjoy life, as opposed to, how you were talking about, like, making that choice not to, check the phone and look and see what's going on social media.
Yes. And it takes restraint. We're so habituated to picking up the phone and checking that it's another short-term versus long-term nourishment. In the short run, in the beginning, it's really hard not to pick the phone up because it's so habitual. And yet, in the long run, it's such a gift to unplug and have the space to yourself. It changes your relationship with yourself in a really drastic way. Because we're so outer focused. Everything's about what's happening out there. Mm-hmm. And we really need to start inviting ourselves to go inward so that we can rest into the depth of ourselves.
And that just provides such greater inner peace, and you develop this knowledge that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yes. And also your intuition comes back online. When we create more space, when we're not busy or worried all the time, we start to slow down. I found that the intuition comes back online, and all of a sudden I know what's next. Like, I wake up in the morning now and I know things that aren't conscious. There's like the depth of my being is like, here's the next action to take. Mm-hmm. I've had experiences where I've had lists and lists of people that I needed to call, and my brain's like, oh my God, we have to start with A and go to Z. And I'll get quiet, like linear thinking, right? There's only one way to do this. We have to start from the beginning, and it has to be really repetitive. But I get quiet, and I open my being, and I say, what's next? And a message comes in, call this person. They're 8 down the line. And I found every time when I listen to that guidance and call that person, it's effortless. The person picks up. We make the appointment. It's really simple. So there's a greater intelligence we all have that's connected to this web of life. And when we're busy and overwhelmed, we're disconnected from it. We're just trying to do what's in front of us. When we slow down and we let our energy field rest and plug back in to this incredible web that we're connected to, our intuition then starts to guide us so that things become more effortless. We don't have to expend as much effort to get things done. We know what's next. The path starts to clear up, and a lot more synchronicities happen where we have this silent knowledge of what our next action is, and there is much more ease in our lives.
And what a beautiful place to be in. I think I have time for one more question here, and gosh, we would love to keep you forever. You're just such, in my opinion, such a great master at having to, just how to move your life into a better direction. And I'm just so thrilled that we have you here to spend this time with us. So, we've talked about so much. How does gratitude play a part in all of this?
Gratitude is one of the biggest ways to ignite our inner fire, to really get more energy. Like, so many of us want more energy. When you go into gratitude, even for the hard things, you open. And it's that openness that then allows more energy to flow in our being, and more creativity and more passion. So to start to be grateful for the little things in your life that we take for granted. Like, I'm grateful right now that I'm sitting in a car and that I have a car to drive. What a cool thing is that? I'm grateful for the trees outside. I'm grateful that somebody comes and takes my garbage from the street every week. Just the little things we take for granted. When we start to name what we're grateful for in our lives, we get more and more energy. And to also have gratitude even for the hard things, because there's always beauty even in the most difficult of things. and we can look towards the gratitude and find a deeper sense of peace in our heart because of that.
Yeah, I love that. I think gratitude is such a big part in our journey that, when I was reading the chapter on it, no wonder you call it the energy igniter.
Yes, it's so, so powerful and so simple. And so much of this work really is simple. And I think that's sometimes why it's easy to overlook it, because our mind wants to make everything complicated. Mm-hmm. Our mind's going to have the tendency to complicate things and worry and create more busyness. And we want to start to move our mind and ask our mind to help us create more simplicity in our lives. And gratitude is one of the simplest ways to create change.
What a beautiful note to end on. My goodness. I'm sorry, we can always spend so much time with you. HeatherAsh, where can our listeners connect with you? I mean, I'm part of your community. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community too?
There's several different ways. So one is just checking out the website, HeatherAshAmara.com, and I have a newsletter that comes out regularly, and I also have a daily spark, which is an email that comes out every morning, a little bitty email with a word and an inspirational quote and a task for the day. And so that's a great thing to sign up for. And I also have a bunch of Facebook groups that put out inspirational quotes and where I answer questions. So there's Inner Fire Tribe, and there's also Warrior Goddess Tribe for the women out there. Those are two great places to connect in. And you can also follow me on Facebook and see what I'm up to. I always do all sorts of fun giveaways and webinars and all sorts of fun things.
Yes, you do. I've been enjoying quite a few of those, and Holly advised our people to go ahead and sign up for that as well. HeatherAsh, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
You're so welcome, Marianne. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Well, thank you. It's always such a joy to spend time with you. To check out more about Heather Ash's book, Awaken, Your Inner Fire, you can visit the Moments with Marianne book club at momentswithmarianne.com, or you can pick up the book at all major retailers. That's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.